And we have returned. You're listening to CSC Talk Radio. This is Beth Ann. We're visiting today with James Stuber. We're calling him Jim for short. He wrote a book, What If Things Were Made in America Again. It's a really handsome book. It's got hardback. I like hardback better than paperback. It's a hardback bound book. It's pretty thick, full of information that you're going to want to read. You need to know what's going on. This is going to help you as a consumer. It's going to help you when you go to the polls to vote. It's going to help you kind of know a little bit about what's going on with our elected officials, I believe. He probably doesn't get into politics in there, but you can kind of see where they've gone with our trade agreements and that kind of thing. I also wanted to plug his website, madeinamerica.org. That's madeinamerica.org. And my website, where I've been accumulating the All-American Market page. These sponsors are affiliate only. They only pay Beth Ann if you buy their product. So you need to go to the website there and purchase the products. You got to use the promo code Beth Ann. We're trying to help them. We're trying to help me. We're trying to get the consumers to realize that it is their responsibility. It is their duty. Just like I said yesterday, to vote, it is your duty to support your country. So when we went to the break, we were talking about, okay, communist China, no, we're not going to do any trade with them. So we're going to go to these other countries and we're letting them make product. And next thing you know, we're not making product. So let's start where you were there.
Yes, thanks, Beth Ann. But quickly, just a very minor correction, but important. It's Made in America Again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did miss that. Okay, again. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
So that kicked off what I call this 50 years of Japan and the era of free trade. And these Asian countries were purposely selling us more than they bought from us. Mm-hmm. They call that mercantilism. And they were putting up barriers to our products. You couldn't try to sell a Motorola phone or even an aluminum baseball bat into Japan. Forget trying to sell a car there. And so you had these low-wage countries and high-wage worlds colliding, where this thing they called the dollar blouse started showing up here in America. In today's dollars, it would be a $10 blouse, when blouses were selling for $30 or $40. And so we had this schizophrenic trade policy of, on the one hand, giving our markets away, and on the other hand, trying to protect ourselves with quotas on these products coming in. It was a mess. And if that weren't bad enough, Mexico got in the act, and they started building these maquiladora plants on the border, just on the Mexican side, and saying, come on down here and make your stuff. You can do it duty-free as long as you don't sell it in Mexico. And so with these cheap Mexican workers started making things there. This is in 65 that started. And then we were fighting communism in the Caribbean. They were still active, believe it or not, trying to spread communism. And so we'd say, here, take our flour industry or take our clothing industry. And we were setting up new industries in Central America, destroying our industries. So you just saw whole sectors coming under attack under these crazy policies. And then it got worse. China adopted just enough capitalism to start having people invest in China and for the export market. And then, as you mentioned, we entered into NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, in 1994. That's maquiladoras on steroids. And then we founded the World Trade Organization, and Russia and India said, oh, well, we're not going to be so socialist anymore. And so you got 1.5 billion people entering the world market, and now we're into the era of globalization. So it was just 50 years of just hammer blows, against our industries. And doesn't that sound terrible? It got worse, because then for the next 20 years, China got into the act, and it's been even worse since we made this terrible mistake of letting China into the World Trade Organization.
Well, and we've taken the jobs away from our own families here in our own communities across this great nation. And because we can get a cheaper blouse, a cheaper dress, and when we say cheap, we mean cheap. I've bought some stuff before, and you walk out and you put it on the first time you wear it, the buttons fall off. I mean, we're talking about cheap stuff. Well, a lot of that is slave labor, basically, just really bad, what they go through to make these products. So in that respect, we're supporting slave labor. I understand that they need some money too, but our families should come first. And, when we've got our own children having to go on to WIC programs and all these other welfare programs in order to feed our families, something's wrong with this picture. And I think Americans know something's wrong, but they're not sure quite what happened. And your book tells that story.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned slave labor, and I really was shocked at some of the things I ran across, as I was researching this. Our listeners may have heard of this one, but in the factory where the iPhones are made, they live 6 to a room in dorms and have to stand in line to go to the bathroom or wash their clothes, and working 6-day, 12-hour shifts. And they were jumping off the roof to commit suicide. So they, instead of improving the worker conditions, they put up nets so they couldn't do that anymore.
Good grief.
Is that
amazing?
Is sad. And then you're talking about slave labor. This didn't really come to light until 2015. The Associated Press did an expose, and they discovered that indeed, off of Thailand, they're actually operating slave ships. And these poor immigrants from other parts of Asia, these migrants come in, and they're lured onto these ships, and they can't get off for 3 years because they offload their catch onto a mothership. And so they're stuck there. They can't get off. So it literally is slave labor, or it's slave labor-like. Another one that really was ironic that I ran across was there was a women's organization in England, and they were having these T-shirts made that said, "This is what a feminist looks like," and they were trying to get members of Parliament to wear them and so on. But The Guardian looked into it and discovered that those T-shirts had been made by women who were making $150 a month, living 16 to a room in one of those dormitories on Mauritius. And those women said, "We don't feel like feminists at all. We feel exploited."
Yeah.
So when we go for that low price, this is the system that we're supporting.
It is. And, I saw some kind of a documentary several years ago on some of that, where these young people were working in these facilities like you described for just a few dollars in comparison a month or a week that went home to their families.
Yes.
That money went home to their families. And I mean, we're talking, this is desperate stuff.
Exactly. There's these billions of desperate people around the world, and then people tell us we're supposed to compete with that. But as you say, trying to solve poverty overseas, we're creating third world conditions and poverty and worse here in the United States.
And, Bernie Sanders talked about the greed, and he's right about the greed. He's wrong about pretty much everything else, but he's right about the greed, because that's what has happened, the greed, and everybody wanting something for nothing. And, well, you get what you pay for. That's what happens. But in doing so, we claim to be this country that's supposed to stand up for humanity, stand up for rights, and look what we exploit. Look what we help them do, while our children, again going back to our children, are put on WIC programs or food programs at the public school or welfare or whatever the case may be. Go to the community shelters where they give out food once or twice a month, and it doesn't make any sense when you stop and think about it.
That's right, and I'll give you a perfect example of that. The Delphi automobile parts plant closed, and it's in Flint, Michigan, and it moved to Reynosa, Mexico. So NAFTA was sold on this idea that we were going to raise up a Mexican middle class who would buy automobiles and refrigerators and diapers from the United States. I mean, you have to laugh to think that people were actually saying such a thing. Because what NAFTA was really founded on was low-wage exploited workers. And I ran across the case of a woman named Rosa Moreno who was making circuit boards for TVs. She got paid $4,800 a year for doing that, as if that weren't bad enough.
Wow.
Machine malfunction.
Okay.
Machine malfunction. We're probably were not.
We're going to head into this break. 877-89. Hold on.
I'll tell you Rosa's story when we get back.
Absolutely. 877-895-5410. And Jim and Beth Ann will be right back.